Hello. At first I would like to thank the organizers of this nice conference for asking me to join and bringing me here. And I will give a short presentation about live URBANCOWS project, which is actually ended by today. It ended at the end of 2016, but the activities, of course, go on also today. So let's see. The area where the project was carried out was Parnu town, which is a coastal town in western part of Estonia. It's the main summer vacation destination of Estonia because of the Parnu Bay, which has sandy beaches and a lot of sun during the summer. The town itself it's not that large. It's only 40,000 inhabitants, but it is highly visited by the tourists. More than 300,000 tourists comes there every summer and stays there for their summer vacation. And this is actually the information all Estonians know. Less of them know that in Parnu town there is quite large nature reserve called Parnu Rannaniidu Nature 2000 site, which lies between the town, between the houses and the sea and the beach. So basically, if the visitor likes to visit the beach area, he or she has to pass the nature reserve. The main values of this nature reserve are two priority habitats in terms of habitat directive. The main is coastal meadows, and the second one is coastal lagoons. There are more than 200 hectares of coastal meadows in the town borders and more than 90 hectares of coastal lagoons. You can see the pictures of both habitats. Coastal meadows and lagoons, they are temporarily flooded. So the meadow area is from time to time covered with the seawater, which is the key element in this kind of meadow habitat type. And of course, they have to be grazed, or the hay has to be collected to preserve of this meadow habitat type. Otherwise, those will be covered with reed and bushes, which actually was the case also in Parnu. In the late 1980s, the grazing stopped, and the whole area started to cover with reed, Phragmites australis, which resulted in habitat degradation and also biodiversity loss, because meadow species, both birds and plants, they can't survive in the reed bed, which is 2.5 to 5 meters high. And of course, it also blocked physically the access of people, as you basically can't see if you walk around in this kind of reed bed you see from the picture, and of course it was also quite a safe place to dump garbage. So in 2012 we started with the main goal to improve the conservational status of those two priority habitats, to remove the reed and bushes from 2020 hectares of coastal meadows, and also to restore around 75 hectares of coastal lagoons by removing floating reed rhizomes from the edges of those water bodies, and also to remove sediments. After the initial restoration work, it is very important to start with grazing as soon as possible. Therefore, the grazing infrastructure was established, and of course the cattle were brought back to the city borders once again. The second larger goal was to introduce the values of this particular area, because even for the local residents, this area had turned into a wasteland, because they even didn't know that it is a nature reserve, and they didn't understand why there are no buildings established in this area. It's just standing there, and nothing has done. So a lot of explanatory work and educating had to be carried out. And to make this access of the public better, we also established the visitor infrastructure for the people coming to the area. And of course, a lot of this disseminating, educating, different kind of excursions, printed materials, and so on. So the first stage was planning stage, which took around 1.5 years, because there was a lot of data gathering that had to be done, detailed planning process and so on, and different kind of technical documentation prepared, and after that we could start with establishing the infrastructure. In the beginning of the project in 2012, we could start with restoring the meadow habitats. An old reed was removed mechanically from the area, and the biomass was used either as a fuel in bioenergy production, thatched roofs, or just burned or chopped at site. Then we started with restoring the coastal lagoons. You see the pictures. We used different kind of machinery to tackle this floating reed in those water bodies, and also some improvement of water regime of the area. We removed the buildings like this water infrastructure that was established during Soviet time, and also put some culverts under the roads and so on. And in 2012, after restoring the first batches, the cattle came back to this nature reserve. Maybe I should mention that as the meadow itself is flooded from time to time, then this grazing infrastructure establishment, it's every year task. So in spring, the farmers they have to establish the grazing infrastructure or the electric fences, and in autumn they have to collect all the materials once again, because otherwise they will just lose those materials to storms. And we also established the visitor infrastructure to 2 observation towers, one nature trail right next to the famous beach area, to ease the approach of visitors to the nature reserve, and also to concentrate the visitors to the less valuable areas of the nature reserve. And we printed leaflets and had different kind of public events for people. The educational impact, to summarize, was we were able to spread more than 50,000 leaflets in 4 different languages during basically 2 years. We launched several outdoor learning programs, especially dedicated to that particular area, which are still running. And of course, the number of visitors increased during the project. around 10%. And we also monitored the attitude of the general public towards such kind of restoration activities. And we saw during the project that the increase in positively minded visitors was 20% during the project, and the final result was more than 80% were positively minded towards such kind of restoration and bringing the livestock back to the urban environment. So about sustainability and transferability, this idea actually started to live its own life since this URBANCOWS project. And one thing that supports this idea is that in Natura 2000 sites, managing those protected meadows is supported from the rural development plan measures financially. In case of tourism infrastructure in this area, we planned and built it as durable as possible. So during next 10 to 15 years, basically no large investments are needed from the side of the town government. And which is really nice is that several other towns have adopted this idea of managing those areas inside town or city borders by grazing cattle. For example, the small town of Kuressaare, which is situated on largest island of Estonia, it has by now, since 2013, restored more than 105 hectares of coastal meadows, and they have also started to graze those areas. And from this spring, the capital of Estonia, Tallinn, also starts with grazing inside capital in one place where they have those kind of meadows, and there are more towns that have joined and taken that idea. And about transferability, as you just saw in the previous presentation, this mechanical restoration of protected areas is really popular now in Estonia, and it's like change of paradigm, because before URBANCOWS project and Life to Alvars project, no one actually went to protected areas with heavy machinery, and now basically everyone use only heavy machinery in restoration. And it's also supported from the European Commission cohesion funds, not only from Life. And during last 5-6 years, more than 202,000 hectares of protected meadows are restored, and together with reintroducing grazing. So it's quite a large success in national level. And about the environmental impact also some words. Actually we saw really rapidly the return of meadow birds in this area in Parnu town. So you see from the graph that the blue line is the number of some meadow connected bird species before the project, and the green is in third year of the project. So before the project, the numbers were in quite rapid decline, and the project changed this decline into increase quite fast. During first 2 or 3 years, the species started to come back, and the same was true for plant protected plant species populations also, because they were still there in low numbers, but still present, so they could return fast. And which was the main concern of the inhabitants of the town was that if the cow is there next to the sea, then probably the seawater, swimming water will be polluted, but nothing like this occurred. We monitored the water quality, and it actually even got better than before the project, thanks to the removal of some biomass by the cattle. And of course direct benefits for the town itself. Instead of impassable reed bed, now the town has 220 hectares of low vegetation traditional coast area instead. So they have improved sea view and access, improved recreational possibilities for the visitors and inhabitants. They can present themselves as a nature preserving town, and this is really interesting for if they go to some kind of conferences or tourism fairs. They really like stand out. And there are new tourism targets inside the town for tourists with different kind of interests, and of course the direct financial investment which was made for the benefit of the town environment. So thank you very much, and I'm open to questions.
Ako imate pitanja.
Thank you. I would have one, I would say, basic question. In the beginning of your presentation, you mentioned that this traditional grazing has been abandoned in 1980s, and I would like to know why.
This was mainly because of the change in agricultural behavior of people, because during Soviet times, basically to survive you had to have your own cow or some sheep, even inside the town. But then you could start to buy milk from the shop when the Soviet system collapsed, and that was the main reason why it was just stopped. And then people went to move away. Young people didn't want to anything to do with cattle or and sheep, so just like change in the behavior.
My question is I would need a clarification on importance of alvars, because from conservationist and climate change point of view, what was first there? Was the forest first there, and then people came, and then grassland? I'm trying to understand the concept, because why to cut the forest, why to clean the grassland when all the carbon is captured in the trees? And
actually, in case of coastal meadows, those are like the terminologies that they are like primary. This is a primary meadow type, which means that in Estonia we have this land uplift, and if the sea goes back, then it comes from the sea, this area, and then the vegetation, meadow plants start to grow there. And historically, some 1,000 years ago, those areas, as soon as they emerged, the humans or people started to graze those areas. So this always has been meadow habitat. About the alvars, that was the previous presentation. Those areas mainly have been forests, but until the time when people started to grow livestock, then they cut down those shrublands or whatever was there, and so for last few thousand years, those areas have also been grasslands. And in case of Estonia, Sweden, and so on, grassland habitat types are several times more species rich compared with forests. That's so there are quite large difference between forest and forest.
Thank you.
You said that people don't have cows anymore, but now how they maintain then this area, this new area, new meadow, if there is not enough cattle for that?
Now I don't know what's the correct term, the economy or the behavior, it has changed. We still have cows, but now one person has like 300 cows. Previously, one person had one. So now it's concentrated, the farms are larger. So in case of Parnu, we have two farmers. One has around 250, another has around 100 cattle, which are taken each spring to the area and taken back to the farm in October. So it's just, situation is a bit different. So we didn't buy any cattle from the project. There are two farmers, they own their own cattle, and they just use this area as a pasture. And this is like, otherwise they would keep those cattle on agricultural land. Now they have like 220 hectares of free agricultural land where they can produce something which is more beneficial. They just don't have to keep the cattle there to get grass.
Još koje pitanje?
You mentioned you produced material for tourists in 4 languages. In which 4 languages, please?
Estonian, of course, then Finnish, Russian, and what was the fourth?
English?
Sorry?
English?
Yeah, of course, yeah, sorry.
Mislim da nemamo više pitanja. Thank you.